All right, we're on episode 7 of the Awake Space Astrology Podcast. I'm Laurie Rivers with you, here to help you with some inspiration to get those aspirations out into the world. Going to change up the format a little bit. Not too much. We're going to get a little more succinct. I'm going to try not to noodle all over the place on you guys. We're leveling up here at the Awake Space Astrology Podcast. This is no longer going to be my little venting chamber where I just scream into the ether all things astrological. And it hasn't been that way for a while. That's kind of how it started. And you can go listen to season 1. I literally came here because I felt too censored on TikTok. But yeah, once people really started listening, I was like, oh, well, might want to shape this into something. So the segments are going to go like this. I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on through the rest of the month. You can listen to the episode about the February astrology if you want the real deets. And then I'm going to talk about the sun in astrology. That'll be in that first segment. Just give a quick recap of what we're walking into. I'm going to just kind of slide into talking about the sun. I'm going to read some comments on the TikToks because they're proving why I'm going to be am now offering offering the Planet of the Month Club, where we dive deep into a planet every single month. So we'll talk about that. I have a wonderful interview with Kaycee Felton Lui. And I think you'll really enjoy hearing her perspective as an astrologer. She's done more than 30 solo readings now and is really starting to hit her own stride. There's this time where you kind of start to have your own flavor, and that's where she's just kicking into that, and we're talking about that. Patron shout-outs, of course, because my favorite part. And then I'm going to answer some questions from patrons, astrology questions. So if you're a patron and you're listening and you haven't asked me to talk about something, I want you to fill out the Google form. I'm not going to answer questions from the Discord, and I'm not going to answer questions from that post. I'm going to look straight at the Google form. Okay. So I've got some questions that I'm going to answer. I'm just going to pick 2 at random, and we'll wind up the podcast with those answers, right? I think that'll be super fun. As always, it's a pleasure to be here with you on the night of that Leo full moon. And I hope you had a breakthrough. I did. Oh, God, I did. And man, I finally feel like I've got energy again. So, woohoo! And we'll talk a little bit about that in the next segment, the full moon. not me, the full moon and you, and what else is on the way. So if you've listened to me or the podcast for any length of time, you know that I can often be right, and I'm not always happy about it. And let's talk about that for a second, because that full moon chart screamed seismic activity. I mean, it was cut and dry seismic activity, and I said it would either happen hours before or hours after on the release of that T-square that the full moon was in with Uranus in Taurus. And there are a couple of different forecasting techniques in mundane astrology, or philosophies, I should say. They're not really, it's the same technique, different philosophies. And predicting seismic activity is tricky. I mean, geologists don't do it, right? And I'm not a geologist by any means. I'm not a seismologist. That is not my realm or my bailiwick. I am merely an astrologer looking at the energy and understanding how the astrology works, and that it reflects what's going on in the world. But if any chart screamed seismic activity, it was the full moon chart. So in one philosophical tradition, looking at that chart would have had something happen near where I live. Using the other style or philosophy, it was purely directional. And that's why if you watched my video about the full moon, I had a list of potential regions. So, and that list was kind of weird because I had Alaska, Japan, the Pacific Northwest, the West Coast in general, the desert of California, down into Mexico, Central America. And there were a bunch of earthquakes in different places. Turkey was not the only one, but I also had the Mediterranean. And these were all based off of two different philosophies. And I've been trying to test out my astrological calculations. Now, I've gotten very good at understanding magnitude. That if it's going to be big or is it going to be medium? Is it going to be a little one? And I don't predict anything under 4.0 because I'd be predicting earthquakes all the time because we have tons of itty bitty tiny, not even 1.0s all over the planet all the time because the earth is always moving. Okay. So throughout most of the day, I was kind of like, oh, are we going to have one? And nothing happened in the West Coast of the United States. And I was like, that's interesting. So I was like, all right. And I almost gave up on it. And then I saw the post in the Discord about the terrible earthquake in Turkey. And we won't have all the information about it until days. But it doesn't take a huge earthquake in that part of the world to cause a lot of loss of life. Okay? The building codes are not like here in the United States or Japan. It's pretty devastating. And so there were lots of aftershocks and some of them quite sizable. And I was looking on TikTok and I saw someone in Crete felt it. So that's the Mediterranean region that I saw. My condolences to anybody who has family over there. Well, what a mess and what a tragedy. So, but again, this is one of those times I don't want to be right at all. That I hate it when I'm right about things like that. Makes my heart hurt. But it does hone in the technique for knowing which route is working best when I'm predicting. Because I get so busy, I wasn't taking notes on which technique I was using was actually the accurate one. I would just be like, oh, predicted earthquake, it was that region. And so this time I was like, okay, pay attention to which one you used for what. And took some notes. So, because I think we're going to have more seismic activity throughout 2023 and even into 2024. And I'm trying to make sure I can give people as much of a heads up as possible. Do not think I get any pleasure out of being right, because I don't. It's hard to prepare for those things anyway, right? So what else do we have to look forward to this month? Well, now again, you can listen to the February predictions if you go back a couple episodes. I mean, we're only into episode 7, so it's not like you have to look back 50 episodes. Just looking, pulling up my handy dandy little calendar I made myself. No, I'm not going to throw it up into Patreon. I might, I don't know. It's not very fancy. I'm just looking. So our next couple of days, we've got the energy of the full moon ringing out. Because remember, a moon stays full for 3.5 days. Okay, so that's the 5th, 6th, and 7th into the 8th, and then the moon phase will change. The 9th, we have Mercury conjunct Pluto. That's a lot of energy, folks. That's another big day. There could be some very disruptive communications. There could be some, telecommunications infrastructure that goes down with that. Now, this is mundane. On a personal level, this can be fan-frickin-tastic, so don't freak out on me. When I look at the chart, I'll just pull that chart up. So when I pull that chart up with the Mercury conjunct Pluto, it'll be later in the day. I mean, the approaching conjunction in the morning will be probably more significant. Well, the approach, when a planet or a celestial body is moving towards something, there's pressure being built. And when it separates or it leaves the conjunction or any other aspect, that's where there's a release. So that's why I had said, I think I said it on a live stream, that the earthquake could happen either hours before or hours after. So on the approach or on the separation. Usually when we have something exact, so when the planets are right on top of each other or making that perfect angle, it's a point of pressure. It's not really, the release is the boom, right? So if you have something that, like a firecracker, even once you light it, unless that fuse gets burned all the way back, it's the release of the pressure that causes the boom, not the firecracker itself, right? So that's how these aspects work. So honestly, when I look at February 9th, it's going to be late at night. This could also be in Europe. So, could be Alaska as well. I don't know. No, I don't know that it's Europe, really. I think it's in a northern direction. So this could be like the west coast of the United States. I don't think it's necessarily seismic activity. Given the time, I think it's a transportation issue. It could be something to do with a bridge or a freeway. It could be, it's not making a lot of other aspects to anything else. Could be something offshore. It could be a marine accident, like a sinking of a ship. It could be like a fishing boat accident or something it could be something in Japan. But I don't, because that's west of me. So yeah, I think it really could be like internet related, phone related, things like that. So that's what we have coming up in the immediate future. On the 11th, Mercury moves into Aquarius. So things will be moving a little faster. Communication will be a little faster. That's all a good thing. Let's see what else happens. So much. And again, I'm just pulling my notes back up. The 16th, we have Venus conjunct Neptune. That's a great day to make a wish. We have the Sun conjunct Saturn on the 17th. And the 18th, the Sun enters Pisces. 17th is going to be kind of a reserved day. And I'm almost wondering if it isn't because on the 14th, the moon is in Sagittarius. The Valentine's Day does not look exciting to me, okay? Well, it could be exciting, but it doesn't look utterly romantic, okay? I think we're going to hear about a lot of people getting cheated on when we go into TikTok that day or Twitter or wherever you go. Doesn't mean your loved one is going to cheat on you, so don't take it that way, okay? It's not what I meant. By the way, as I looked at the recording time, it was 11:11 when I said don't take it like that. So, see. But I think we'll hear about some cheating. I think that'll be interesting. We've got the Sun conjunct Saturn on the 17th. I said I think it's going to be subdued energy. I think we all just might feel tired or a little heavy that day. And then the 18th, we have the Sun enter Pisces. And then we've got that new moon in Pisces while Venus moves into Aries. And I'm not going to talk about that too much today because I'll do a whole episode on that. So stay tuned. Stay tuned if you don't subscribe. Why? So let's talk about the Sun and Saturn. Now, just know when I said I think it's going to be subdued energy, that's the mundane level. That's collective consciousness level. It's very different on an individual in a natal chart. The Sun represents our animating force. Okay, it is not our personality. It's not our ego. Those are not true. Those are things they were talking about in the 60s when they were trying to legitimize astrology, and they were like, "Oh, we're not fortune tellers. We don't do predictions." Like my teacher had me learn both mundane and natal at the same time because it was his opinion that you wouldn't be a good astrologer without it, and I got very lucky. Because like you did not admit to being a mundane astrologer back in the 90s at all, because the preceding generation had decided it made us look like fortune tellers, and we weren't fortune tellers, and we were going to be legitimate, and they felt like that's why science refuted us. And I will argue the reason why science refutes that is because astrology is not a science, but you can use it like data analysis if you approach it with a more scientific mindset. I will still die on the hill that astrology is a field of study. So what I did beyond to study with a teacher, because I was limited in my resources because I lived somewhere I wasn't supposed to be doing this, I spent a lot of time observing, taking notes, and not just correlating things and trying to make it fit, but to see was something replicable. Okay, was something replicable. Could I get a repeat answer every time, right? And so, which lends to predicting, by the way. Now, I'm fairly intuitive. Like hella intuitive, and my teacher would give me all kinds of slack for not doing the astrology, kind of like when I was predicting earthquakes earlier over the last year. Like I was using two different techniques, but I wasn't writing down which one I was doing. Yeah, that kind of thing. I know better. I wrote notes this time, okay? I didn't get too busy for it. So when it came to understanding the planets and how the planets interacted, I watched the people I knew. And now the only thing I could work with was the prevailing wisdom. And out of the kind of the pop astrology and even some of the professional astrology out of the 60s, 70s, 80s, which are where a lot of the foundational books are from, I ran with that. Like, oh, it's your personality is the Sun, and that's not true. It's not. And that one never made sense to me anyway, because I was like, doesn't the whole chart make your personality? Because we're complex, right? We're complex, and human development, whether it was through culture or social training, family patterns, that was always fascinating to me. So that's why I minored in anthropology, cultural anthropology. Because, understanding how different people believed and thought and moved about the world was important to me. So I would look at that and be like, that just doesn't make sense. And then, interviewing friends and family, just asking them questions, and getting their responses. And then once I became a reader, and I read lots and lots of people, I was able to keep notes, right? I was able to keep notes, and I would compare charts and experiences, and that's how I came to these understandings. So The sun is not your personality. It's not your ego. It's just not. That's not the truth. Okay. It is your energy, physical energy levels, how you feel depleted, how you are energized. And it is not just the sun sign itself, but also the house placement and any aspects. So someone who has Saturn conjunct the sun isn't necessarily always tired. They could be a real goer. There's usually some, reasons for that, whether they felt neglected by a parent or never could be good enough to a parent or always had to prove themselves to a parent. They may have endless amounts of endurance, but if they stop doing something, they have a hard time getting back up into it because the law of inertia is really applying there. Now, this is the kind of thing we'll kind of cover. I'm not going to go there first, like with aspects, but understanding what the sun is in the astrology chart. So it is your essence, the spark of life, okay? Your inner sun, right? Because the sun is the source of life in the solar system. I think if we approach it from that direction, it's our little dynamo. That's how we move. Now, not everyone who has the same sun sign will have similar energy levels or feel depleted or rejuvenated in quite the same way. But there will be a broad theme, okay? A broad theme. And so like Aries, they're like a sprinter. They are very active, but when they crash, they crash. It usually takes a hot minute. Or if they're doing something that is kind of boring to them. The same when we look at Taurus. Taurus is as steady as you go. They're not a grinder. It has nothing to do with, go. They do like to be comfortable. If they're uncomfortable or in an unpleasant or unsupportive environment, they'll lose kind of their ability to function. They'll take oversleep, over naps, That's where the lazy Taurus comes from. Taurus is not a lazy sign, but if it's in an unsupported environment, you lose your vitality. And that would go for all the signs, okay? If you're in an unsupported environment, you will lose your vitality. Point blank. So in this world where corporate life or retail life, customer service life, delivery person life, gig worker life, where you have to hustle and grind, we are not designed to live like that. These are outside of our normal human needs, okay? And so, Aries does need to be around people to some degree, but not just anybody. They should be people they can highly, jive with, right? So that's why we like to be around people who, in general, have trines or sextiles to our suns. That's why you get the Aries-Gemini action going, or the Aries-Leo. And, that they'll energize each other, right? Likewise for Taurus. Taurus needs to be around Cancers who are a little more low-key. Taurus has incredible endurance, but if they're in an unsupported environment, they'll chill all the way out or just nap. They lose their vitality. And they can reground by either getting out in nature or eating something yummy or some kind of tending to that need for comfort. Geminis, everybody talks about how bouncy they are. Well, Geminis also burn fast and bright, a lot like Aries, but they don't burn and then burn out. They burn, rest, burn again. So it's short bursts of constant energy. And boy, do I know that when I raised a child with 5 planets in Gemini. Thank God for their Taurus rising. Whew. I did not sit down from the time they could toddle until they turned 5. When they suddenly decided, I want to watch cartoons. I'm like, yes. Oh, my Lord. I was literally fully prepared for Christmas in August that year. because they had slowed down and I hadn't. And I was like, oh, wait, oh, God, I can sit. So, and if Gemini is not in a supportive environment, it's a little bit like Tinkerbell. You know, you got to clap and say, I believe in fairies to get them going. Cancer, energy ebbs and flows. There are going to be times of the year where you've got all the energy in the world, and there are going to be times where there is just not enough caffeine ever to help. It won't matter what you do, who you're around. It's just going to be like, and now, no. That's just it. I understand I'm a Cancer sign. Also, it's a bit like Taurus, though. There is a good amount of endurance. Like, they can soldier on, but it doesn't mean they're going to be happy about it. Leo burns very, very bright and really enjoys having people around because there's an exchange of energy. You know, they kind of light up the room, and then they're lit up, and then it's a mutual exchange. If a Leo is in something that doesn't float their boat or in an environment that diminishes their light, they can get exhausted really, really fast, and you'll watch their light just dim, you know. This is not something you're necessarily consciously doing. You can consciously amend the energy. This is something we'll talk about in the Planet of the Month Club. Virgo energy tends to be kind of steady, not real fast, but steady, but clear and sharp. And if it gets fuzzy or foggy, they're in an unsupported environment. Okay, and it's one of the reasons they often prefer animals to people, because animals in general can kind of light their fire. And light your fire is very much what we're thinking about when it comes to the sun and staying energized. And then we've got Libra. Libra really needs collaboration. It needs a very peaceful environment. If it's too rowdy or uncouth or not pleasant in any way, a Libra will be very devitalized, and it'll show in maybe their physical appearance, or maybe on their desk, something like that. But Libras will lose their vitality through an unpleasant or toxic environment, as in lots of arguing or just when other people aren't getting along, that kind of thing. They do need to be around people, but people who are good at collaborating. The Scorpio energy is, again, like I said, our society isn't really set up for water signs. Scorpio suns do better in an environment where they can, even if they have to be part of the group, they kind of have a solo space to recharge. So whether they have their own cubby, or their own cubicle, that kind of thing, or a panic room, just kidding. But the Scorpio suns need a place to retreat to, so even if they share space in a house, there needs to be a quiet space for that person to recharge their batteries, or they'll be depleted. If they have to be too much in front all the time, depending on the house placement, they'll lose vitality. Sagittarius, if Sagittarius doesn't have enough fun, and Gemini too, if you don't have enough fun or adventure going on, Sag, not enough stimulation, not enough newness. So if you're stuck in humdrum routine, you will literally just get so tired. You'll probably gain a little bit of weight. You need to walk it off, be a little active, or go for a drive even to recharge those batteries. Capricorn is, again, another steady. Now, this isn't so much slow and steady. This is, I'm a tank in a video game. Don't. Law of inertia plays a role here too. There's a need, like chaos will deplete you. Chaos. If you're in a chaotic, very, kind of wild environment, with not a lot of structure to it, you will get very tired or very cranky, may have a meltdown. You'll have a much more need for self-care. Let's see. Aquarius, funny enough, a lot of Aquarius will be like, I'm a loner, but then they join a lot of groups. But, they're on the outside because they're a nice outsider. But they need the energy of the group to feel vitalized, okay? It's not really what you think. You'll be like, well, I need like minds. And it's like, well, it's really not even about minds. It's about the environment needs to support that energy level that you have, your energy expression. And so your verbal expression or your intellectual expression is Mercury. We'll talk about that another day. That's for March. But the sun itself is your energy level. So if you also are in an environment where collaboration or, if it's everybody's out for themselves or they're very greedy or they're underhanded in some way, you will be devitalized. Pisces. The world was not made for Pisces in some ways. The world was, but not our society. You get devitalized by being in large, crowded spaces. Even if you're a gregarious person, you have to be very selective about who and how you hang out. So like school, like elementary school, middle school, high school could have been devitalizing spaces if you were not able to create a close little group of friends where there was a mutual exchange of energy. You might be very, very tired if you're in a hustle and grind culture, even if you're good at what you do. You may even like technically what you do, but if the wrong people are in the room, you can be sucked dry really fast because you have a hard time kind of guarding your energy. Now, you can learn how to do that. You can learn how to do that. And it's not just, bubbles of white light and wearing the right crystal. It's learning how to change your perception so you're not constantly misting out your energy to the people around you. So that and then taking on things that don't belong to you. And that's a learning curve. So that's kind of the sun through the signs and talking about energy levels. I don't know. I've gone about a half hour. Maybe I'll read one or two of the comments, but then I want to get to patron shout outs and Kaycee's interview. So let's take a look at some of these. So let's see. We got people being like, oh my God, there was a train accident in Ohio and a 7.8 quake in Turkey. Yes, I know. I predicted that. Okay, let's see. So somebody asked, Scorpio Sun, Aries Moon, Gemini Rising. What about a Scorpio Sun with these placements? Now, here's one of the problems with pop astrology. They just gave me their big three. So if they're a Gemini rising, then I'm going to assume, but see, I don't know what degree their rising sign is, so I'm not exactly sure where Scorpio is going to hit. But so Gemini, Cancer would be second house. Well, it's easier to go. Sagittarius, so it'd be sixth house maybe. So this person would need a very steady, stable environment that offered the chance to be of service and changing lives in some way. So if they're in a very superficial environment or in just kind of a greedy environment, it doesn't mean they don't make money, but a very greedy environment where, people aren't really taken care of, they'll lose their vitality. So there's one. But see, asking just about the big three doesn't help. Let's see. So looking at another one. I would love to understand more about how degrees affect perception or progression of one's rising. See, that's just, to me, I don't know where some of those questions are coming from. People thinking that their sun position is why they're going to therapy. It's your energy levels, right? And so what we would look at is the position. So if you're devitalized, learning what support looks like, and that's something you could address in a therapy session with a therapist, for sure. But when we're talking about astrology, before we can get to those subjects, you got to really understand what I mean by energy levels, just like your physical body and how it feels and when it feels energized and when it doesn't feel energized. So you can deliberately kind of choose your environments and find the right either work environment or family situation or living situation that's important. So yeah, I think it's time for some patron shout outs. But first, don't forget to sign up for the Planet of the Month Club, where this is going to be much more detailed and super fun. All right, now we'll do some patron shout-outs. It's time for my favorite part of the podcast. It is time for Patreon shout-outs. Thank you to all of my patrons. You guys are amazing and wonderful, and your support means the world to me. And as you know, I've launched a new tier called the Planet of the Month Club, and we start tomorrow. Tomorrow is the first workshop for Planet of the Month. I am so excited about how many people are showing up. It's like crazy. So without further ado, let's give our shout outs to our newest patrons. Unofficially Loki, Mariana, Gabby, Rhiannon, Catherine, Garrett, Olivia, Allison, Liz, Maina, Jennifer, Yadira, James, Stacy, Alexander, Kevin, Karen Lee. Those are our newest patrons. Thank you so much for being part of the Awake Space Astrology Patreon. Let's see. So up next, I will be reading questions about astrologies from patrons. Okay, so don't reach out to me to answer your questions. Don't DM me. Okay, because honestly, I don't check my DMs all that much because people kind of find ways to sneak in and try to ask what, and I don't have time, guys. I don't. I'm really busy. I hardly have time, to do what I need to do for me. I got laundry done today, and I was excited about it. So if you have a question, get it in the Google form, in the Patreon. If you joined after I sent out the email, I said it in the last couple of days, but you could always log into Patreon. There's an app you can download. You can scroll through the post, find it, put your questions in the Google form, and I'll make sure I put that into that link to the Google form in the Crunch Report going forward, because that's where I put all the links for everything. Alrighty, on to your questions. Are you ready for some astro chat? I've got Kaycee Felton Lui, one of my astrologers, and I say my with pride. Welcome, Kaycee.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Super excited. So, we're going to talk a little bit about Planet of the Month, but before that, I want to give you some props. You've got a new blog.
I do. I just kind of went with the energy, and I published my first astrology blog.
I love that. You want to tell me a little bit about it?
Yeah. So it actually kind of started sort of impulsively. I was listening to you talk about the Leo full moon coming up, and it inspired me to do kind of a little TikTok series, and it was a little bit more writing oriented. Normally my posts are me talking to the camera, and I'm a writer, and so I haven't done a ton of astrology writing up to this point, other than, like my notes and things like that. For readings and just personally, I haven't really put anything out in the world about astrology writing wise. So I kind of use the TikTok series as an opportunity to explore that. I kind of wanted to just give people a taste of what, the intensity of the Leo full moon might be for them personally, and just kind of like some really just brief questions about what they could maybe think about and do with the energy. And so I just called them vibes.
That's perfect.
That was the term I came up. Yeah, because they're not like, I feel like astrology, or I feel like horoscopes in this case was maybe a little bit a little bit bigger than what I was doing. These are more prompts, things to think about, depending on where the full moon is happening in someone's natal charts, house based. So yeah, it turned into that little TikTok series turned into me. I just the energy this week was so wild that I had a lot of personal stuff going on, and I was like, I'm not going to be able to make 12 of these videos.
Right.
So yeah, I had fun making them, but I was like, the quickest, most efficient thing is going to be me putting them down in a blog post that I don't have to make, backgrounds and add music to and whatnot. So yeah, with that, it was just kind of like a need to complete basis. So I launched my blog on my website, and that's where you can find the Leo full moon vibes.
I love that.
And there's prompts for each of the 12 houses, and just kind of an idea of what to look for awarenesses around, and some questions to ask about what to release and what to receive.
I love that. So if you're listening to this, listener, on February 6th, you can still use those prompts, because the moon remains full through the 7th, because the moon phases go in 3.5 days. So from Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, the moon is full. So you can still use Kaycee's prompts, and you can go to KayceeFeltonLui.com, right?
Yes, that's my website. And there's a link to the blog right there.
Cool. Awesome. So we'll put that in the description. And you guys can also see the blog link in the Discord if you're a patron and you're in the Awake Space Astrology Discord. Kaycee's content is the thread, or the channel, I should say. So there we go.
Yeah.
That's exciting. Good for you. You have some great stuff.
Yeah, thank you.
I enjoyed the Venus series that you did. So.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, it was a lot of fun to make, and yeah, I'm looking forward to making more stuff on TikTok.
Me too. Sometimes we go live.
We do. That's very fun as well.
It is. So speaking of why do one planet at a time? That's a big existential question, isn't
it? I think of it often. Yeah. I think I'm so excited for this, because I mean, I've taken every class that you've offered since I came into contact with you. I've been there for all of them.
Right.
I'm there. I am. I have loved all of the classes. This is so different, because when we were doing like the natal chart classes, I can't remember quite how long they were, but it was, several months at least of, weekly classes. And we covered so much information in those classes. I feel like this is really a great opportunity for even people that have taken those classes already, to get really into detail because anybody who studies astrology knows that you could spend so much time on every single planet, every single house. There's so much depth in astrology. So to really take it planet by planet, I think it's going to allow people that maybe have studied astrology a little bit more to really solidify their knowledge and expand their knowledge. And then for people that are newer to astrology, it's such a digestible pace. And it's not the pressure of it's a rolling class, so there's not the same pressure of, you only have a couple months to kind of cram all the knowledge in.
Yeah.
And it's a little less intensity. And so I'm really looking forward to like this style of class.
I am too. Yeah. Planet of the Month is more like a club. So it's not like there isn't a lot of information in that 1-2 hour class I do each month. Of course, there's going to be a lot because you guys are going to work through it throughout the month. But it's you've taken my classes, fire hose, and then every week trying to keep up. I know it can be overwhelming. And so this seems much more fun. And we'll have games and stuff too. I'm going to make some little bingo cards for people to use on my lives as well that are in the Planet of the Month. So that when I'm on a live, if I say something, make a bingo. There's going to be, and Jen's got a game. She's got a Jeopardy game she made.
Oh, I love that.
Right.
Games are fun.
So, and that's the other thing is the office hours are going to be run by you guys, my natal astrologers. So, and so it'll be very discussion based, game based, fun based. These guys are not chopped liver. Okay, listeners. We were kind of talking about that a little bit at the beginning, before we started recording. You brought up like your readings validated something to you this week. What was that?
Yeah, I've had a really great week with readings. They are always great. I'm very thankful for that. But this week was, I feel like I'm just kind of getting more of I'm just getting comfortable. And it just kind of, the trust is building with myself. And I feel like, when you study something and you study under somebody, that's kind of your foundation. And I've done enough readings now where I'm starting to expand on that in a more personal way. I'm kind of like feeling like I'm getting, a greater sense of like what, on a personal level, what I'm doing and what I want to pass along to my clients in general. Kind of developing my own vocabulary in a way.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
As you should.
Yeah, it's been really interesting and really validating. It was just a really positive week.
I love that. Something you mentioned too was just the dawning that I really do know this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so many times it's like I'm doing the astrology, I'm doing the notes. I'm basing my notes, my interpretations off of, what I'm seeing. And I just, out of my own habit, there's just a habit of second guessing myself. And, is that what it is? Or, am I seeing something else? Or am I just having my own story going on in my head? And, this week was just a really huge, resounding confirmation and I'm like, it's time to kind of let that I'm growing out of that part of this. It's, and it's been slowly, I've even talked about it on the podcast before, but just the confidence is growing. And it's just becoming very apparent to me what I can give to my clients. Like I feel like just out of my own perspective of myself, we're with ourselves all the time. We can kind of underestimate what we know and what we're good at because it's so familiar to us. And this was also something that kind of, it comes up for clients too. So, I'm having to kind of do what I advise other people to do.
Mm-hmm.
Which is always funny, right? You're like, oh, I guess it applies to me too. I also have to believe that I have the power.
Right.
I also have to, yeah, it's just this, it was very blatant this week, and it's just like, all right, next phase. So
I love that.
yeah, feels good. It feels really good though.
I love that. I love watching your guys' confidence grow as you get more experience under your belt, because that's the only thing that makes you a better natal astrologer or mundane astrologer is doing it. You can have all the intellectual knowledge in the world, but if you're not actually practicing reading people or predicting events or doing both on a consistent basis, then it's like being an academic with no field work. You're not going to be as good as the person with field experience. You're not.
Oh yeah.
I will die on that hill.
Yeah. It's changing it from theory to practice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why I like teaching applied astrology. That's kind of what Planet of the Month is going to be. It's like, yes, there's the theory side, there's the history side. I was geeking out today finding a Babylonian chart, a photo of that to kind of prove a point. And why we want to use some of the more modern techniques, because math got refined over time and our understanding of the world gets refined over time.
Absolutely. Hopefully.
One would hope. I mean, there is the agents. The agents of ignorance are attempting to toss us into another dark age, but who kept knowledge alive during the dark ages? Astrologers in the Middle East. And so it has always been upon the shoulders of the astrologers to keep knowledge safe. So, but there we go. So it's very funny. And with all the talk about cultural appropriation, which again is an important discussion to have, I think though people need to understand there's a big difference between an evolving process of understanding and appropriating. So this already, but for our listeners,
absolutely.
If you are a white person born and raised in the United States of America and you go, oh, Vedic sounds cool, you're culturally appropriating. You are, point blank. It is a system of astrology that serves people from a very specific culture and a cultural point of view, and a system that is intrinsically embedded in a culture that good luck being able to adopt a tenth of it without having been raised in it, because it's very complex. It's got a very rich history, very long history. But Western tropical astrology didn't co-opt out of there. It split from there way long time ago, like way long time ago. The two have similar origins, but are different branches of understanding. So for all the people who want to do that would be culturally appropriating something. Understanding that there is a historical evolution of understanding of astrological knowledge from the Western tropical point of view, it wasn't co-opting anything. It was expansion, and Europe in the Mediterranean were not as separate as later historians wanted it to sound like. So trade was very fluent and culture was very fluent. So I'm on my high horse because I'm going to teach a history lesson tomorrow. Be like, okay, let's understand this. By the way, it doesn't mean Vedic is not a valid form of astrology. It's exceptionally valid. But it has a very particular culture from which it hails. So in the Indian subcontinent. And I have some really dear friends who are masterful Vedic astrologers from India. Guess what? When we all do our work, we come up to the same conclusions. So we just come at it from different angles. But
yeah, it's fascinating.
Isn't it? Yeah. So I just like to kind of, because I've seen some narrative on TikTok lately of some younger people kind of being like, Western tropical is colonizers. And I'm like, well, colonizers may have used it, but it wasn't a colonized form of astrology. That's not quite it. So people may have used colonized thinking in it, which is why we progress the interpretations to get some of that out of there. What do you think about that? Like when you've read other books and there's patriarchy and misogyny and isms of all kinds.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
It's it kind of makes me step out of it and recognize the very human and the astrology has a sort of timelessness about it. At the same time, we are bound by the time and place that we are existing in as we interpret ourselves or as we read whatever we're reading, right? So you read these very, the same placement being interpreted two different ways. If it's a man or a woman, it's like, well, yeah, and in that time and place, that may be more how it manifests. But the idea that that there's like sort of an inherent energetical difference between, a man, quote unquote, and a woman, is it's just a bit silly to me. It's just the more that I study astrology, it's just like, and the more, people that I encounter and perspectives that I encounter, it's just like, those kind of things are all just very human and cultural, and they have much less to do with the energy itself. Yeah.
It's definitely books are written from a cultural lens or social lens. Yeah. It bugged me too when I was a young astrologer. I'd be like, why is it different for a guy and a girl?
Yeah, it's just it's bizarre a little bit.
Yeah. But then, the cultural anthropologist in me was like, oh, well, that's because they want people to fit into this, where they're coming from a a heterogeneous mindset of this is socially acceptable, this is culturally acceptable, and this is less desirable in this culture. And so I was like, well, but that doesn't make it true or right. It makes it true from that point of view.
Yeah.
But not from a wider scope. Go ahead.
Absolutely. And I think it's so important that anybody who's serious about using astrology or understanding astrology to be the kind of person that interrogates those kind of things. So when you pull an astrology book off of a shelf and you read something like that, that you go further with it, you ask questions, you understand when it was written and by whom, and, look at it in a broader context, and, not just take what you read for granted or take what somebody tells you for granted.
Yeah, or face value, or that it's the gospel, because you can't. And what's funny is I didn't think as much. I mean, again, from the beginning as a young astrologer, I did not like the binary approach. Back then, I just called it social constructs, and gender roles. Because in the 90s, we were looking at forget. And this is why, by the way, some people in my age group in their 50s are like, why are you bothering with pronouns? Because one of the things we were trying to do is just be like, hey, it's people. We were shooting for, let's go to humanity. And it was just a different time, right? So we'd be like,
Yeah.
what if I'm just a human being? What if that's what I am? Because
what's funny is that
yeah.
it tees up nicely for what we are experiencing now, of course, right? Because conversations surrounding gender and the non-binary identities that exist are very much built upon that movement of understanding.
They are. It's a complete evolution, just like we talked about. It's an evolved understanding. And I see that. I mean, for a while, I was kind of like, just, I don't care what you call me. I'm a human being. Just call me whatever. I don't care. But honestly, I prefer they in sometimes but then there's a little misogyny in that, because to be a she is to be at the bottom of the totem pole, So it's like, yeah, there's so many things. And it reflects in astrology, because I can just hear some listeners going, why are they talking about this? What does this have to do with astrology? Read about Venus and Mars, and then you'll find out, it's like, it's all through there. And so it was you guys who, when I gave you a book list in the beginning, and I don't recommend books anymore because of this, I think it was you specifically. You were like, okay, this is really mean.
Yeah, I think I even revisited some of it. It was Planet. Well, I'm not going to say what it was, but it was. I revisited it recently and was like, oh yeah, it's still mean.
Yeah.
It's just it was so dramatic. The interpretation was so dramatic, so negative. I was just like, okay.
Yeah, it really, really can be. And so that was when I was like, oh man, I got to rewrite these things. So Kaycee and I are actually working on that. So
yeah,
we'll have to make a
very
date to go
excited.
over. Yeah, we've both been too busy to go over what is it, 20 pages we've got of
that's
dialogue.
The first transcript. Yeah, we have a lot of we've got a lot of material. Yeah, that was transcript one. Yeah, we have a good amount of material. So I'm looking forward to doing more.
Right, and diving in. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, the interpretations so desperately need to be updated. It's just not even funny.
Right. And it's not that the astrologers were bad. Like, the astrologers were amazing astrologers. It's just they were white men of a certain age from a certain time period. And that was the prevailing attitude and the social lens.
Yeah.
And like I said, it annoyed me. Some of these books were written in the 70s and then updated later,
Right.
And so, the 70s was a vastly different. And being, in my 20s and the 90s, I was just like, oh my God, really? The 70s? Okay, I think it means this. And I knew I had to research on my own to find how things could be interpreted. And I use that as a guide. Absolutely. Like the theme of it versus the details.
Yeah.
And that's what I encourage you guys to do. That's what you were talking about. You're getting your own language, your own way of expressing from a solid framework and foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. And the more you do it, the easier that gets.
Yeah. Yeah. So listeners, understand, just because we read books doesn't mean that's the whole story. That's called cookbook astrology. Okay.
Yeah, there's just no way that you can translate that to, it's just not enough.
Yeah, I mean, Gordon Ramsay can put out a cookbook and we can follow those directions to a T, and we are still not going to make Gordon Ramsay's dish. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
I am. I get so excited to see where you're at and I love to hear about every reading.
Yeah, it's nice. I'm proud of myself for it. I know I've worked really hard, and I really care about people's experiences in the reading, and I know we all do. Um,
Yeah, but
I've worked really hard, and the knowledge is great. I use it personally all the time, but it's a different gift to be able um to share it with other people. I don't like hoarding it, you know. I want to help other people, because not everybody can be as obsessed and you know, put the time and energy and have the type of training that I've had. And I feel really grateful for the experiences that I've had. And I want, you know, people that are looking for that greater insight on themselves, looking for another perspective on themselves. I want them to benefit from that, because, you know, to me, it's like, what is it for if not to use?
right. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's genuinely, like, astrology has absolutely changed my life. It's made it so much richer, so much better. Which is wild to say. I feel like people that haven't gone deep with it might, or that don't, you know, aren't exposed to it regularly. I would have thought that was a strange and interesting statement prior to all this, you know. And
Yeah.
it's so incredibly useful. I just feel like it makes it just really enriches my experience of being a person. So I'm always happy to get other people excited about it, and to show people what it can do.
Yeah. Yeah. That it's not a belief system. You don't sit there going,
No.
oh, I will never do anything on this day, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, there might be days where you're
Yeah.
like, do I really want to be on the freeway that day? Maybe I'll take the back roads. But
Yeah.
which
Absolutely. I
can,
mean, it can definitely make planning easier, but I don't like to, you know, I don't like to use it superstitiously. I don't think any of us do.
no.
It can be just incredibly practical.
Yeah, very much so. So you mentioned something like leaving your clients with something or helping them with something. If you could
Yeah.
leave your clients with just one thing, what would that be? Like, how do you want them to feel when they leave the reading?
I want to give them a better sense of their own magic. Um, I do think that, I mean, you emphasize the personal power so much, and it's kind of along the lines of that. It's, you know, I think we get so accustomed to ourselves, and um, it can be very easy to lose sight of, you know, the things that we are good at, the things that we've accomplished, the potentials that we have, the choices that we can make, um, and then the personal magic that we all have, and the ability to feel spiritually connected, and empowered, that's magic to me.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of that's what it's done for me. It's made life more magical, and um it looks different than I might have thought that might look, if somebody were to say that to me to all this. But like, it's not Harry Potter, but I don't know, it's real, it's better.
Well, magic in the mundane,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, to clarify, I know what type of magic you're talking about. Just, it is magical when you realize you have a lot more say in how life happens. It's not that we can
Yeah,
avoid certain circumstances, but it's how we navigate those that matters and often determines the outcome. And that's
absolutely. And
magic.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And the awareness of the options. And I don't know. I think there's something, sitting down with a stranger on a Zoom call and having them look at your time and place of birth in a map form and then tell you a bunch of stuff about yourself. Like, that's magic. That's why it's
Right.
wild that it feels so magical. And to me, when that happened to me the first time, it was like, what's going on here? Like it raised questions, and it was like, okay, yes, I got a bunch of information about myself and how I can better navigate life going forward, but also just the basics of what we were doing was magic in and of itself.
Oh yeah.
Right. It's just like,
Yeah.
it was a very magical Zoom call. Like, you don't necessarily, like, we don't think of magic in that, those terms necessarily. It's not, but it is, it feels very, very, very special. And to me, like, that type of interaction, it just opens the door to more types of magical interactions like that. It just raises more questions, and it opens more doors.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I like to do. I like to open doors for people. That's what I want to do mentally.
Yeah.
That's the magic, right? If you're like thinking about the image that came to mind is like A Nightmare Before Christmas, the forest with the trees in it. That's kind of what we do. We go to the forest of you, and I open the little doors.
I love that. That's a great visual.
Right?
The forest of you, opening up the little doors. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And society and culture and family patterns, they sometimes aid in those doors getting a little stuck. So seeing an astrologer is a good way, because we do have the key, because we're looking at, the key is your birth chart. And how cool is that? I love that visual. I like have a whole claymation scene in my head now because of that.
Yeah.
Only I could do claymation.
I know. I love claymation.
Right? It's the best. But I do. Right now in my head, there's a little movie playing because of that visual. That was great. Kaycee is so good with language. That Mars in Gemini.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I love it. I love words. I love language. I love, and I think that from the feedback I've gotten, I think clients really feel that. Somebody told me recently, they thanked me for being able to, they said that they often have difficulty putting things into words. And that was something that I felt it was a gift I was able to give them, that I didn't go into it necessarily thinking of it in those terms, but yeah, it's that's what I do. I try to find the right language and those key terms and phrases that I don't know. I find language and in finding the right word to kind of a delicious experience. That's the word that's coming to mind. It's like I kind of I delight over it, and I love figure. It's a little bit like a puzzle, and I'm happy to do it for people. It's one of my skills.
Yeah, no, you're very gifted at that, and I think in return you're gifted back confidence.
Yes, thank you. It's a good exchange.
It is. It's a fair exchange, because, and just the sense of awe that you've learned this stuff. And you can get really used to it. Like, it's a shorthand language. Oh, yeah, that person, they've got, North Node in the 3rd and Venus in the 5th, and, and state right, and the rest of the astrologers would go, oh, yeah. But to be able to take that and then explain it in a way somebody can understand, and help them understand why they have stage fright and why they need to push past it. And that, I don't know, I spent my whole week telling clients, yeah, well, life wasn't supposed to be comfortable. You know, that was my
one of
week.
those weeks.
Yeah, as I was having an uncomfortable week.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
We're talking to themselves.
oh my God, yes. Like clockwork.
Right. And always said with
Yeah.
love, by the way. But there were a couple times I was firm.
Yes.
You know, hey, it's
Yeah.
not supposed to be comfortable. We're here to live it. And sometimes life is
Yeah.
uncomfortable. That's where growth happens.
Yeah.
It is a gift to come back. I'm so proud of you. You took to this like a duck to water, but I knew you would from your first homework assignment. So when you wrote your first homework assignment, not only did I love your style, and I was like, man, I want her to help me because my eyes are breaking. Like, whoa, there's the save. And I don't know that I would have thought about having you join me writing if my eyes were not,
right,
falling apart. So it was like, wow, that's beautiful. But I also saw a great potential, because anybody that puts the time in can learn the calculations and, the intellectual knowledge. But to be a really good reader, that takes somebody dedicated to communication.
Oh yeah.
In some way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really special place to, be in that moment, to be talking with somebody about their life. It's precious. And to give words, to put words to it, it's it's an honor.
Yes, it is. And so what are you looking forward to? We're going to hop over to the last question. What are you looking forward to being able to help with as one of the guides on the side, one of the facilitators of the office hours? What are you excited about in meeting with a group of people and talking astrology?
Oh man, I am very excited to pass on my knowledge and to help people that are, interested and eager to learn more, navigate things and, break it down into bite-sized pieces, and let's have cool conversations about it, and practical conversations about it, right? Because we all have our own charts, and, we're going to go planet by planet. So I'm sure that we're going to have conversations about how that plays out for us in our individual charts. And that's one of the ways that all of us as apprentices, got so we built so much knowledge through that type of sharing. And so I think that Plan of the Month Club is a really great opportunity to have some of those conversations in our office hours, and really just build some like really solid astrological foundations for people.
Yeah. It's almost like I kind of picture it kind of being like a cafe where everybody's sitting around talking astrology, and that's where all the good stuff happened when I was in college. It was in the school cafe. Like all the best conversations happen there, or the pub, those in England. But sitting around a table debating philosophy and different perspectives, and so this will be a little more structured than that, but it's still going to be so fun, and I think it's going to be great for you guys, because I think sometimes when I'm around, people just want to ask questions. And I love having taught you guys because we get to have conversations. I trained people so I could talk astrology.
And we love it.
Yeah, for real.
You're willing victims.
Right?
Just kidding.
But sometimes in a larger group, then I go into teacher mode. And on this one, I wanted to give people a chance to explore the content. And I thought that helps you guys stretch your wings. Mm-hmm. And then I'll end up with more people to talk astrology with.
Exactly. This is all part of our plot.
Right?
To have more people to talk astrology. Yes.
real astrology.
We're like,
Well, Kaycee, it is such a pleasure. I got to get back to finishing up some stuff for tomorrow's first live session,
yeah,
which is exciting. And then
so exciting.
the Discord has already started to pop with introductions. So if you're in Planet of the Month, get in the Discord, because that's where most of the action is going to happen. Videos will get popped up in Patreon. But so, alrighty. We will have you back again, my dear.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, and I'll see everyone in class.
All right, we've got a new segment on the podcast, Astrology Q&A, and these are questions submitted by patrons, and I've picked 2 questions. The list is getting pretty long, guys. Quite a few of you asked some pretty darn good questions, and I've actually seen a couple. I'm not going to pick them at random because I've seen a couple that go with future episodes, and I was like, oh my gosh, you guys are asking questions right in line with what I'm going to need for content. So thank you. So the first question, and this comes from Amelia. Are physical ailments issues visible in the natal chart? Any thoughts about the ethics of medical astrology? So it's not just a yes or no answer. So and I have lots of thoughts. So the answer is yes. Do I have thoughts on it? Yes. And I'll give you what they are. But let's talk about the physical ailments issues visible in a natal chart. If someone is highly trained and experienced, they can see potential issues and ailments. However, I don't think it's appropriate for people to study medical astrology until they have actively practiced as a professional astrologer or serious amateur for multiple years. Because in order to be good at medical astrology, you have to have an extremely strong foundation in not only natal astrology, but also mundane astrology. Now, that being said, from an ethical perspective, my concern, watching the state of the internet, watching people do live readings, so many people do not understand the risk and liability of making medical claims. First of all, that can get you in trouble for your business. Second of all, that's not an astrologer's job. Our job is not to make a medical diagnosis or a psychological diagnosis. We are not diagnosticians. Sorry, I got Discord popping off. It's that time in the morning. We are not diagnosticians. And unless you are a licensed medical practitioner or a licensed therapist, I don't think you have any business making claims. In fact, not only is it unethical, it can skirt legalities, right? It leaves you very liable. So when I'm doing a reading, and I am trained in medical astrology, and I didn't train in it when I was a first newbie astrologer. It was something I added once I was very firm and very secure and had gotten over overconfidence and hubris and all of that, and the attachment to being right and blah, blah, blah. I was probably 5 years in, maybe 6 years in, when I started studying medical astrology, I mean, it's a long time ago, but I'm pretty sure, because I know I did a couple of workshops with like Jeffrey Wolf Green and a couple other people. But yeah, he was a remarkable medical astrologer. I really wish he would have written a book, but I think he didn't for the same reason I wouldn't. It's too easy to misuse information. And he really stressed ethics. He really made people understand that you don't screw with people's lives. So I have not even taught my students, my mentees. I'll give them hints and tips sometimes. And sometimes they see me mention something in a reading. So if I see a client has a potential issue, I'll ask, hey, have you ever had any issues in this department? And if they say yes, I'll be like, well, you might want to get it checked out. It's always good to go have a checkup. Sometimes they are already in process because of transits. Or I'll ask if somebody has a particular condition or something related. And if they don't, I'm like, hey, don't worry about it, because it doesn't mean it's 100%. I tend to say, does it do this or this? Because sometimes it's not a health issue. Sometimes it's something else. And you have to have the discernment. So because you don't want to plant a seed of a problem for someone. So to sum it up, are physical ailments, issues visible in a natal chart? Yeah, if you know what you're doing. And the ethics of it, you should never diagnose anybody. I always refer people out if I see that there might be a need for more psychological support. Doesn't mean you're having a mental breakdown. It just can mean, hey, it's a bumpy time. You're going through a lot of personal growth, and having a therapist can be helpful, that it could be something like that. So, yeah. So let's see. I had another question. I hope that answered your question. You can let me know in the Discord. Let's see. Oh, this one. Who put this one in? So I've got ACS717. What are some red flags to look out for when trying to learn about astrology? That's a really good question. And I could have a very long list. You want to be careful about people who treat astrology like it's some kind of spiritual path, because astrology is not a belief system. There are belief systems that use astrology, but not in the Western tradition. Okay, Western tropical astrology has not been part of a religious tradition for many hundreds of years. In Eastern religions, astrology can play a role. When people show a huge amount of bias, so if you're watching videos on YouTube or TikTok, when people show a lot of bias against a sign or put down, chart systems or what have you in an uneducated kind of way. So like when I make fun of whole sign, I back it up with facts. Okay. And I also remind people, I studied 14 different house systems before I decided Placidus was what I was going to use. And I was torn between the Koch system and Placidus because they were really, really close. And how did I test it? Well, I did measurable activities, like I did little predictions and I'd work them out on the various house systems and what I could see. Whole sign and equal houses are at the bottom of my list. They're just not as fun for me to read. They're not as accurate. And that's kind of funny because people be like, well, but for natal astrology, I like this. And from mundane, I like this. And no, because a natal chart is the only thing that makes it different from mundane astrology is that as an individual human being with free will, you have the ability to express your consciousness in a spectrum. Okay, so I don't know. Some of those excuses are kind of funny to me. Now, but when I talk about it, I'm talking about I practiced, I did experiments, I made data. I didn't just repeat something I heard someone else say. Or, well, it's modern astrology. So anybody who's dissing modern astrology probably really hasn't studied the history. They might have read a book. And reading one book makes you not an expert at anything. Okay. One book ain't making you an astrologer. I can guarantee it. It takes a lot of time. Other red flags are people who think, say they can make you a professional astrologer in a very short period of time. No. It takes time and practice and study, and if you want to shorten your learning curve, getting a mentor and taking classes, that's it. Astrology was never meant to be a self-study subject. It is traditionally, if people want to be traditional, it's always been an apprenticeship process. It looked very medieval in that respect, but it's one of the best ways to learn on top of, supplementary studies, reading books, casting charts, practice readings. But having a mentor is really going to speed the process up. Or just taking classes from lots of different astrologers that are credible. Certified doesn't make you a great astrologer. 90% of the time, those certifications are about when you hand calculate a chart, or they're looking at what I would consider basics, like, knowing your aspects and orbs and retrograde motions and what have you. That's like, if you're practicing professionally, you should know that. But interpretation is not emphasized, and that's something I think needs to change, and that's why that's my focus. I focus on interpretation. So red flags, people who make really big, bold claims without using data to support it, or any, or having like any background in interpretations, or like if they're not interpreting charts, if they're just regurgitating the same information as everybody else, and you want to kind of question everything, even what I say, go research it, go look it up. Some of the stuff I say in interpretations is not popular. That's why I've started calling my live streams Unpopular Astrology, because some of it's a progressive interpretation, but it's still steeped and built upon the original astrology, So yeah, those are some of the red flags. Be really careful of books that say, this is the only one you're ever going to need, because that's never true. Understand that some of the best books on astrology, if you go to a bookstore, were written a really long time ago, and we kind of talked about that earlier in the podcast. And that's why I'm doing the Planet of the Month Club. Giving people a chance to learn things step by step, kind of immerse it. As a patron, you get the astro guides. And then also, anybody who says, my way is the only way. I'm very, very clear. I have a preference on how I do astrology and the astrology I teach. It does not mean it's the only way. Like I say, traditional interpretations work just fine if you're very committed to the status quo, if you're very committed to like a corporate life, if you're very committed to the social norms and highly defined social roles, then those are exactly the interpretations that need to be used for that person. But if somebody is on a personal growth phase, or that's their life mission, or their soul's intent is to continually grow and evolve and change, guess what? Not everybody says, and it's not a judgment against those who are not. Then they need a different kind of interpretation. Okay. So people who say there's only one right way to do it, there are, when it comes to interpreting math, there's one right way to do it. And I also like to explain, like you'll hear, this is how you can trust a teacher, is when I'll say, I like tight orbs. I like 0 to 6 degrees. However, conventionally, 8 to 10 is acceptable. And some people go out to 12. I find that far too wide. And that's more of a Hellenistic thing. And I can explain why that math doesn't quite work and why they did use math like that. And so, but if somebody just says, well, they're always going to be this, and you can't, well, that's, if they don't explain, hey, this is my preference, it's based off experience, but it's perfectly acceptable, and here's where it's going to be different, that's going to be somebody you want to listen to. Okay, but 90% of content creators who talk about astrology know enough to be dangerous. And there are some very good ones, and they're the 10%, but they tend to be very, very good. And my goal is to grow up a whole crop that will either write blog posts or answer questions on astrology forums, or just inform their neighbor that they are so much more than they thought they could be. I hope that answered your question, and feel free to ask me more in the Discord. All right, so we covered a lot of ground on today's podcast, but mostly focusing on the planet of the month, which is the sun. And I hope you enjoyed the little segment about that. If you saw my teary TikTok, just know I'm okay and my mental health is okay. I had just seen some statistics and my heart was just not happy, and I know you mean well when you tag me in those videos. But it just feels so uncomfortable because I think, oh my gosh, if somebody who is from that area or their family's been affected and people are tagging me, she's right. I don't want to be seen like I'm capitalizing on that. I predict not to be right. There's a lot of times I hope I'm wrong. But I predict future events. And I try to be as, upfront as I can about the potentials, right? Because it may not happen, and I also feel bad because I kind of thought it would be Southern California, and it was Turkey, which, they don't have retrofitting in general. And that all we know are numbers from a bigger town, but that fault line has just, oh my God, it's just been rocked. There's been so many earthquakes, and here's the deal, the latitude for where the bigger quake happened was 38 degrees north. Well, LA is 34 degrees north. And so I now know which technique I need to use to more accurately predict directions. I did have the Mediterranean in there in my prediction. And it was on the bottom of the video. The earthquake was, I'm not surprised it was above a 6.5. I almost put 7 on the prediction, and I didn't want to freak people out. Sometimes I kind of play things down a little bit because I don't want people to be afraid, because it's not 100% guarantee. I did figure we would see a sizable earthquake. I was hoping it would be offshore. It is not fun to make those kinds of predictions. What does it do to my mental health? A lot of you suggested I take some time. I have really great support, first of all. And second of all, I tend to cry more when I'm frustrated or just a little bit sad. I'm all right. I was trying to finish the podcast and finish the class materials for today for the first class of the Planet of the Month. And I have to say, I'm really liking it. It's pretty jazzy. And then I got kind of caught up in the earthquake notifications. I do have an app I use because I'll run other calculations. I'll look at the earthquake patterns, and I'll be like, okay, where's the moon? What's this happening? You know, doing my mundane astrology with it. But, you know, Turkey and Syria are just getting rocked that whole region right now. And just, you know, I'm an empathetic person. What can I say? I'm thinking about people's lives, not just the damage or how many billions it'll cost. I'm thinking about families who've lost loved ones, or families who didn't lose anyone physically, but lost their livelihood, or access to clean water, or, you know, the food issue. And then in Syria, I mean, oh my God, like they needed anything else. You know, we can be mad at governments and extremists, but you have to remember, at least in my experience of traveling around the world, average people are just doing average people things. They get up in the morning, they eat their breakfast, they talk to their family, they might have a fight on the way out the door because they're stressed out or they got bills to pay, and they go have lunch, they work, they have job, husbands and wives and, you know, friends, and they're just living their lives, you know. And when your life is interrupted in a traumatic way, well, that's not a very fun experience. And so, like anybody who's empathetic, how do we feel that? Well, it resonates with things we've experienced. So I haven't experienced that kind of event, but, you know, life interrupted sometimes. So that's why I cried. And I don't want people to think I'm capitalizing off a disaster. That's just not my style. I just want you guys to be safe. All right, that's it. That's all for episode 7. I could talk all day. My Gemini Venus is in a mood. But there's other stuff to do. So much to do. Getting ready for Planet of the Month. Hope to see you there.